Welcome to A Bevy of Bloods, a fan podcast of the Sydney Swans Football Club. I'm Noddy, joined as always by Stevo. Stevo, how are you, mate?
Yeah, good, mate. How you been?
Yeah, good, thank you. In episode 5, we're going to review the round just finished, catch up on the AFLW final series, preview the upcoming round, and all with a very biased focus on our beloved Bloods. Without further ado, let's get stuck in. Okay, first up, let's look at how our Swannies did in round 3, the first MCG game for the year, up against the Richmond Tigers. The Swans absolutely dominated the reigning premiers in a display that Richmond coach Damien Hardwick himself described as simply brilliant. In a comparatively less humble quote, he also said the Swans played in Richmond-like fashion as the bevy of Bloods absolutely ambushed the ambush of Tigers with an incredible victory, scoring 17-12-117 to Richmond's 10-12-72. Okay, Stevo, first impressions, mate. What did you think?
We play like Richmond. Hey, I'll take that. Richmond's had a good run.
Yeah, cheers, Dimmer.
Yeah, thanks, Damien. We appreciate your praise. Look, it was an amazing win. I'm still buzzing. Hey, I watched it on the replay. I mean, as those who've listened in for the last few weeks know, I'm living in Finland and we've got a time difference, and the game was on at like 5 something a.m. and I slept through the alarm and I didn't wake up for it. And by the time I woke up, the game was already over, but I didn't know the scores. So I watched the replay and it was a stressful first half, at least, watching it thinking, oh, when are the Tigers going to come back? What's going to happen? I could check the scores and end my misery, but I'm glad I stuck it out. And yeah, I was buzzing. Great win.
Oh, mate, I was like, holy Bradman stand. What the hell are we watching here? Okay. I was like, it was the best feeling since Gaz Rowan took the mark against the Bombers on the bell in 2017. And I actually think the best game since our 2012 grand final victory. A better performance, but had that same sort of feeling. It felt like a grand final almost, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. And it's that sort of like, it's not the Swans don't play at the MCG much, and we don't play Saturday afternoon at the MCG much either. So it really did have that feeling about it. You know, top team in the comp Saturday afternoon, good weather. It was spring weather, like September weather. So yeah, really, really good.
A fantastic day out for us Bloods. Okay, so just quickly, team selection reaction. Franklin was out against our prediction. McLean in, obviously. So Franklin, you were saying a short turnaround, so that's why they probably rested him.
Yeah, I mean, you can probably now take our team selection comments with a grain of salt that we make for the rest of the season, because we were both adamant that Buddy would play. He didn't. But then, yeah, we realised afterwards that there was only a 5-day turnaround. And, of course, it makes sense to not send him on an away game when there's that quicker turnaround. And again, I mean, same as round 1, McLean came in and did really well.
Yeah, he just continues to step in and play that role, doesn't he? I think so. Bell was the medical sub after Ling in round 2 and Hayward in round 1. But yeah, the team continues to look pretty good. So what were your key takeaways, mate?
I guess one of the things that came across listening to Longmire talk in the media after the game in the various places and in the press conference and stuff was that he still talks very much about a team that's learning. And they're a very young side. Like on paper, they were still one of the youngest teams to play. I mean, North Melbourne are currently in a so-called rebuild. And I think the Swans team on the weekend was younger than the team that North Melbourne played in their game. So he's got this really youthful side that he's bringing through, and he's teaching them a style of football, and he's sort of letting them come of age in a style of football. And I think you can see that in the game, because you've got a whole bunch of young guys who are being brought through learning a game plan that's working. And then you've got a bunch of older guys, more experienced guys in the team who are buying in and being leaders and being part of that. So that was one of my main things that came out of the game.
Yeah, and similarly, mine was that the first 2 rounds were not a fluke. So I think everyone was predicting, well, I was certainly predicting catastrophe somewhat, even though I gave the Swans the tip last episode. I just, you could see the game style has changed, and we've got the personnel that's enabling it, and still have that nice balance, obviously, between experience and youth. But clearly now we're a team that's elite by foot and with elite pressure. And we'll go into that later on, but I think we're the best in the comp at the moment in those 2 areas. So yeah, just it looked fantastic. And actually, if we look at the quarter by quarter scores, again, you can see that we won the first quarter 2 goals to Richmond's 1, the second quarter 8 to Richmond's 3, the third 5 goals to 3, and then Richmond won the last quarter 3-2. But obviously the damage had been done in that dominant second quarter. But the other interesting thing to take away from the quarter by quarter breakdown is that the Tigers never managed to score more than 3 goals. Well, in fact, 3 goals, 3 behinds precisely in each quarter. In the first quarter, they were 1-3, second quarter 3-3, third quarter 3-3, fourth quarter 3-3. So not only are we piling on the points, but we actually stemmed the flow of points against this game. So it was a complete performance. But why don't you give us some team stats, Stevo?
Yeah, I've got a couple. And before I do, I think credit to you, Nod, because you picked the Swans to beat Richmond. I didn't give them a chance, like not even a sniff of a chance. But you put it out last week on our tips, and you said, "Nope, Swans to win," and you nailed it. So well done, you. I'm going to be
Thanks,
getting
mate.
my
There was a healthy dose of emotion involved. Let's just say it was 99% heart and 1% head. But things changed a week later. Bringing down the dynasty, things changed a lot, and I think we're going to go on this later on. Where we're going from the underdog to perhaps the team that's being hunted and going to be, scrupulously studied. So let's dig into some team stats to see how the game played out.
There was a couple that I thought were interesting. This one's less of a team stat more than like from the game, but more than something over the past few years. This is now the third week in a row that the Swans have scored 100 plus in a game of footy. The last time that we got 3 scores of 100 in a row was May 2017. And that was coming off the back of a grand final year where we were, at the top of our game, really. In 2019, we only went over 100 twice in the entire season. Last year, we didn't. They were shorter quarters, so, there were lower scores generally. But even then, we weren't a dominant scoring side. So that's one, is just that our scoring has been not just increased, but increased consistently. And against very good opposition. We've beaten, 2 teams who were top 4 last year. So that's not like you're kicking goals against, the sorry to pick on North Melbourne, but the North Melbournes of the world every week. We've done it against good opposition. So that's number one, was this much increased scoring as a pattern. Second, scores from intercepts. The Swans against Richmond got 13 goals, 10, 88 points, to 2 goals, 10, 22 points from intercepts, which again is huge. It means that we're doing the work with the pressure defensively, but then really turning it into scores, because it's one thing to pressure, but it's another thing to actually damage the team once you've won the ball and put them under pressure. And then my final one for the team stats would be our dominance around the ball. If you look at the stats list, just at the player stats, the top 6 possession winners on the ground were Swans. Number 7 was Short, and he butchered a lot of the ball. That's a massive amount of players who are getting really heavily involved. So that'd be my main team stats for this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're number 1 for points for, averaging 121 in the first 3 rounds. And yeah, we're out in front, so it's a good feeling. It's also great to watch because it's very exciting, obviously. But let's carry on into the best and fairest. So a bevy of bloods, best and fairest, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Stevo?
Oh, look, this was a tough week this week to pick the best players. I reckon there was about a dozen blokes I wanted to give votes to, but yeah, we have to pick. So I gave 5 votes to Wicks, and 4 to Papley, 3 to Mills, 2 to Hickey, and 1 to Dane Rampy.
Fantastic, mate. I gave 5 to Wicks, 4 to Papley, 3 to Florent, 2 to Warner, and 1 to Mills.
Okay, so we actually agree on quite a few, I think, don't we, by the sound of it?
Yeah, at least Wicks, Papley, and Mills, and then diverge on Hickey, Warner, and Rampy. So, okay, let's touch on Wicks.
Oh, look, he was amazing, wasn't he? He took about a dozen marks.
You got your catchphrase there. I know we should use it.
Yeah,
come on.
Hit for Wicks. I was watching it thinking, the Swannies the Tigers have been hit for Wicks at the MCG, and if I was a headline writer for The Age or The Sun, then I'd be, loving life. No one went with it. I was amazed. So I guess.
Yeah, I was pretty harsh on that one, mate. I was like, only cricket people will get that, but
which is only like half the sporting population of the world. So. India is a big country.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, let's talk. So Wicks, incredible game. Obviously, he's been solid in rounds 1 and 2, but completely backed it up this game. 3 goals, 2 behinds, 21 disposals, 13 marks, 3 tackles, 8 score involvements, 2 goal assists. Was just incredible. He missed a couple of those kicks, those 2 behinds he probably would have kicked. In fact, he kicked similar kicks to those in rounds 1 and 2, but it didn't matter. It was a complete performance and actually reflected in the AFL fantasy scores. But yeah, another academy product, just continues to perform consistently. And we're blessed at the moment, aren't we?
Yeah, for sure. And he, I think if you look back at his last week too, in his first round, he had a good sort of scoreboard impact, and we noticed him on the stat sheets. Last week, he against the Crows, he did as well, but maybe not to the same extent, or not to the same obvious extent. One thing he did do last week, if you look at his pressure acts, and we're not sure exactly how the stats people define what a pressure act is, but let's assume that it's a good thing to get a pressure act stat. Let's assume that he had 27 against the Crows, which put him in the top 3% for the entire AFL that week. And he's backed it up with an amazing game on the MCG.
Yeah, he has. He really has. And I mean, he's done himself a world of favor, hasn't he? Because there's, as we've touched upon already, there's so much competition for spots, and he just continues to step up and really, solidify that position. And obviously, next to him in the forward 50, we've got Tom Papley, who bobs up and kicks 4 goals, and was just lively all day. How wonderful! Do you have any points on Papley there, mate?
Oh, I mean, Papley gives us what he gives us. We know he's an elite footballer, and he showed us that. And I think the Richmond defenders didn't pay him enough respect. A lot of the time, Papley was allowed to operate in space. And when you've got a player as smart as Papley, and as devastating in the forward 50, you can't give him a sniff of a bit of room. And they did, and he hurt them. He did really well.
Yeah, totally. And if we look at those, the midfields coming through, so we both selected Mills, and I've got Florent and Warner. So these guys, they're, the young and upcoming midfield brigade, definitely Warner, who actually has been announced as the Rising Star nominee for round 3, which makes the Sydney Swans the first club ever to have 3 nominations or 3 weeks in a row. So what an amazing thing that the club has achieved already in the first part of the 2021. Certainly puts the pressure on Logan, and I think Dylan Stevens is still eligible, but no pressure there, boys. We're cheering you on. But yeah, like Mills and Florent. So Mills is just that devastating link player, racking up the disposals. I think he had 31, and Ollie Florent also similarly had 29 disposals, but just continues to make really smart decisions and open up scoring opportunities, typically coming out of the back, the defensive 50. But yeah, and Warner, obviously. But I think you had Hickey and Rampy as a point of difference from mine. So yeah, give us a couple of points on those guys, Stevo.
Oh, look, I think Hickey just did another fantastic job in that ruck role. He competed strongly at all of the ball ups and the centre. He was effective on the ground. He snuck forward and kicked a couple of goals. I mean, I don't know what more you could want from a ruckman really in a game. And then Rampy was incredibly controlled across the back line. I mean, him and McCartan, the pair of them, played very, very good roles on their the 2 big players in Lynch and Revolt. Lynch got away in the second half, but let's be fair, the game was over really by early in the third quarter. And Rampy in particular, I thought, directed and controlled that back line, and through his pressure work, which I'll talk about when we talk about our favourite moments. Actually, I want to highlight one from Rampy. Yeah, he's a fantastic player.
We'll go straight into it, Stevo. Tell us your favourite moment.
Okay. So there was it was in the third quarter, midway through the third quarter, and Richmond were bringing the ball through the middle with a bit of run, going forward. Rampy is the one back. He's got his player in front of him, a Tiger player, I forget who. He puts a bit of pressure on him, like enough pressure to make sure that Tiger player squeezes out like a messy handball to his Richmond teammate who's loose, who's then running. And that Richmond player you would think is going to be away and deliver the ball into forward 50. But instead, Rampy follows up, lays the next tackle on the same bloke, the guy you would think is just going to run forward, and wins a holding the ball in the middle of the ground, stops the momentum, and we get to take the ball forward again. And that's the sort of thing that Rampy does all the time. One effort from Rampy is never one effort. It's always multiple efforts, and that shows it perfectly, I think.
Yeah, that was unreal. That was in my top 5 or 6 favorite moments. And you and I were fighting off air. I was like, come on, let's get it. There's definitely 10 favorite moments here. But yeah, Rampy, I think it was on Caddy that he got. But yeah, it was fantastic effort. And look, my favorite moment of the match, and I think this may have been a lot of Swans fans' favorite moment, was Chad Warner. Oh my God. Bursts out of the centre square with a couple of minutes, maybe 2.5 minutes to go in the third quarter, I believe. Second quarter, apologies.
Yeah, end of the second, I think. Yeah.
End of the second. And he bursts out of the gates, puts the Jets on. He brushes off Jack Graham. And Jack Graham is a built tiger, and he's also one of their serviceable midfielders. So he's just brushed him off like he wasn't even there, and then launches a goal, maybe a couple of meters inside the 50, and it's his second for the day. He ends up with 2-1, I think. But yeah, and obviously gets the Rising Star nomination out the back of it. But how good is Chad Warner? Like, wow. I think you said you were maybe more excited about Chad Warner than you were about our other our current, the most recent draftees.
Yeah, I think so. And I don't mean that just in terms of I think that he's going to be a better player or whatever, he's more talented. What I mean in terms of being more excited by him is he's a complete unexpected. I mean, we've known for several years we're being his kids from the academy. Logan McDonald has come pick 4 in the draft. So we kind of expect great things from these guys. And then for Chad Warner, a bloke who played 2 games last year, kind of in a forward pocket, didn't do anything amazing. He was solid enough. And then all of a sudden to come out round 1 this year, and by round 3 be a starting centre square player who's chopping through and kicking goals on the run, breaking tackles on the 50. I mean, that's exciting to me. Like, it's amazing.
Absolutely. I mean, he looked like Patrick Dangerfield, the way that he can scream out of the centre square and kick a goal. But may I just say that Chad Warner does it without any of the self-importance. But yeah, he's just like this sandy-haired kid from WA who I think was maybe a third round draft pick for us. In the same year as Dylan Stevens and Will Gould. And I think he was obviously very capable at a junior level. Like, I think he had a lot of disposals in his under 18s year. But when he came in, the first thing that I liked about him was his tenacity and the fact that he looks like a bloke who just likes to tackle. And I think, in fact, in his first year at training, I think Horse had to tell him to bring it down a notch because he was injuring all the senior players. But he's clearly found his feet this season after another preseason, and he just looks incredible. Yeah, a well-deserved Rising Star nomination, I think. And I think we said last week that Wicks missed out. It was ineligible because he was 1 year too old at the beginning of the year. So that's unfortunate, obviously, because Wicks had a fantastic game, as we've already touched on. But any other favourite moments, Stevo? It was a win. It was an amazing performance. Any other shout-outs, or are you happy with just Rampy?
No, just Rampy's enough this week. Plus, I mean, the Warner goal from the centre, I think I've replayed that one about 15 times since Saturday. So, yeah, those 2 for me this week.
It was just so exciting, wasn't it? It was fantastic. All right. Well, that's it for the review of round 3. Let's jump into AFL hot topics, and we'll start with AFLW final series update. Cheers, Stevo.
Okay. So we had the first round of the finals in the AFLW this week. We had Melbourne versus Fremantle, and Melbourne got the win in that one. Collingwood played North Melbourne, and Magpies got that one. So those 2 teams go on to the prelim finals, which is going to be Adelaide versus Melbourne in Adelaide, and Brisbane versus Collingwood in Brisbane. So both outside Melbourne, the prelim finals for the AFLW. Collingwood's game especially, I think, is worth highlighting. They came back from a big last quarter deficit. I was watching the game, and I thought North had it. I thought it was over, and then Collingwood just went goal, 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 bang, 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 and got themselves into the prelim final. If we look at, I think, the games coming up, I reckon Adelaide will probably be too strong for Melbourne. They'll get through to another grand final, their 3rd grand final, trying to get their 3rd flag. And Collingwood, I think they should atone. They lost to Brisbane in the last round in a tough game, and I think that they're a good side. And even if it's on the road, I think that Collingwood will get up in that one and get through to their first ever AFLW grand final. In the 2 of those games, I reckon I'll give you a player to watch if you're watching for the first time or fairly new to the AFLW. In the Crows versus Melbourne game, watch Erin Phillips. She's amazing. She's the best player in the comp. She's won the comp BNF a couple of times. She spent 9 years in the women's NBA in America. She won 2 championships. She's won medals with the Opals and the basketball. She loves the big stage. She's awesome. Honestly, I think that she could play against men at state league level, and she'd do it right. She's a very, very good footballer and strong. And then Brianna Davey from Collingwood. In the other game, she used to be the goalkeeper for the Matildas, actually, in like round ball football. She's a ball magnet. Last week, she had 31 touches, 9 tackles, and that's in 15-minute quarters. I mean, she gets the footy. Yeah, she's a beast. She really gets the footy. So, yeah, so I'm picking an Adelaide versus Collingwood grand final for the AFLW.
And that will be, if that comes into fruition, that will be played in Adelaide. Is that right?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, fingers crossed for that. We all like a grand final out of Victoria to shake things up, as we saw last year, just to keep the VFL mafia a little bit nervous down there. But no, that's fantastic, Stevo. All right. So next point, and I think that there's a couple of parts to this next question. Are the Swans the real deal this year? Obviously, the other two 3-0 teams are the Dogs and Demons, but of these three teams, who will go further? And inevitably, there's going to be some whinging from down south about the academy. So we won't delve into it too much, but that is something to just keep in the back of our minds as we go forward if we continue the success. So first question is, are we the real deal this year? And who will go further into 2021 out of Dogs and Demons and Swans, who are currently 3-0?
Okay. I think right now, after the first 3 weeks, I think you have to look at it and think that the Swans are playing top four football and they've beaten top four competition. And it's the third week of the season. Let's not get too carried away. We've still got to, just to get into the finals, we've still got to win like another 9 or 10 games. So it's important to keep perspective. But just on what we've seen, yeah, I mean, they beat Brisbane away. Brisbane was a prelim finalist last year. They beat the Premiers away, and they had a fairly good kind of workman-like-ish win, but still good win against another up-and-coming young team who had just come off beating another one of the prelim finalists. So it's a pretty good line of form, I think. And if they can maintain it, there's no reason they can't be in the finals.
Absolutely. It's just been such an exciting and quite unexpected start to the year. And I think that we touched upon, I think in our our review of 2020 last year, about how we had some key injuries or injuries to key players and players with experience, which allowed younger players to gain experience. But then at the same time, we lacked that consistency because they were young and inexperienced. So I think the thing is, obviously we're going to go from the underdog to being studied closely, but if the other thing is we're gonna need our injury list to stay nice and fit as it currently is, and then the other thing is just consistently pull off this game plan that we've been demonstrating over the past couple of weeks. But I think it's possible. I think we were talking about if we look at the fringe players, the players that are waiting in the wings, that if we are hit with injury, they could come in and perform a role. So let's just have a quick brainstorming session about who those players are, Stevo. Let's start with the back line.
In the back line, I guess in the back line we've got Ling. He's the one to come in. Melican as a key position player. Brand is also there as a key position option.
Yep. AFL experience.
Yeah, yep. He's played like out of Hawthorn. He's spent some time at Hawthorn. Gould, as yet untested, but a lot of positive talk around young Gould, who we drafted the year before last. He hasn't debuted yet, but it's a tough backline to crack a game in at the same time, I think, to be fair.
Yeah.
O'Riordan as well in the back line is one. Fox is injured. He'll come back from his injury. So that's a few.
Yeah. And let's go into the midfield now.
All right. Do you want to do the midfield? You can.
Sure. I mean, already we've got the guys that are basically, we've got Bell, we've got Stevens, we've got Rowbottom, who's currently injured, who I think we'll go into in the preview. We've also got like players like Lewis Taylor, who can step up as sort of that mid forward role. We've got Ryan Clark, who is basically the definition of role player. The guy I think runs the most out of any Swan. I think he runs like 15 kilometers a game, and can basically just do whatever Horse asks him to do. He's not like super influential, but he's a key player, I think, to our depth, and he'll probably come into the fray at some point this year, should we have to call upon these players. Okay, well then, have I missed anyone in the midfield there?
I think that covers most of them. Yeah, there's
That's
a lot.
About right. Yeah. So forwards as well, obviously. So Lewis Taylor can double. Who else have we got there?
Some of the taller ones, I guess, that we haven't talked about. Sinclair can play sort of tall forward role.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Amati has been talked about as a possible forward option. In the ruck, if we go back to the midfield, we've got Naismith, to come back into the ruck, hopefully. So there's there's good coverage along there. We've got a bloke called Buddy Franklin who's playing every other week.
Oh, sorry. How did I fit? Okay, yeah, Lance Franklin, yeah. Ben Ronke as well.
Yes,
is obviously shown that he can really perform at top level. And obviously Sam Gray, the ex Port Adelaide player, who showed a little bit last year, but I think was obviously needs to lift consistency. But if just thinking about those players we've shouted out, it feels like we're building this very solid foundation of depth. That's a fair assessment, right?
I think so, for sure. I mean, I remember looking a couple of weeks ago at this at the beginning of the season, I think after the preseason, and going into this year, I counted 40 players, like 40 players on our list who had either played at least a couple of games of AFL or would have realistic aspirations to, like your Gouldens and Campbells and McDonald's and Gould, these sort of guys. So 40 players, that's a lot. I mean, that tells me that there is good depth, that if there's injuries, there's enough. I mean, if you get devastated by injuries, of course, it's tough. But if you've got a manageable injury list, I think we've got the depth.
Absolutely. And obviously the East Coast VFL kicks off on the 17th of April. So all these guys will be getting, top level experience week in, week out to get their bodies ready should they need to step in. But the other thing I want to just very quickly touch upon as to whether real deal or not. Clearly we're 3-0. Everyone's talking about us. There's a lot of buzz in the industry at the moment, but it's backed up by a lot of stats. So the game plan that we're playing and the way that we're pulling it off, we're currently number one for disposals per goal, points for, scores per inside 50, points from turnovers, points differential from turnovers, defensive 50 to inside 50, and that's that Dawson and Campbell and Rampy movement, defensive 50 to scoring, as you touched upon in your key takeaways, post clearance pressure, kick rating. And we've had the most inside 50s in 20 years. So these are a few stats that are running around in the AFL media at the moment. So it just backs up that we're performing very, very well. It's not a fluke. It's 3 weeks in a row. But as Horses said, it's early days. It's a week by week proposition. So, we just need a few things to go our way. And for those fringe players to get the experience in the East Coast VFL. And yeah, we're sitting quite well. I mean, it's exciting. It's very exciting as a Swans fan. Stevo, are you excited?
Yeah, I am. One of the things that really excited me watching the game on the weekend was just how difficult it was for Richmond to clear half back. They'd win the ball. I mean, they've got good players all over the field, and they would win the ball either from intercepts or at ground level in their defensive area, like in the defensive 50. But they would get absolutely strangled trying to move the ball out. Not only would be the pressure on the person trying to exit 50, but then if that player managed to exit 50, there would also be pressure on the person up the field who was next. And then if they did manage to convert that again to another possession forward, on the targets upfield. So we really strangled them from the very first time they touched the ball on a turnover until we were able to turn it back ourselves or force them into bad forward 50 entries. And that to me is a team that's really, really playing for each other. They're following a plan. They're following defensive patterns that are making sure, as has been talked about a lot in the football media this week, that the Swans, when they're turning the ball over, they're turning the ball over as close as they can to their attacking goal as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what Dimmer was trying to tell everyone, that it's actually Richmond-like, but he obviously didn't, he didn't invent the wheel. He just honed it and put some steel rims on it. But yeah, look, that's it, isn't it? It's tackle pressure, forward half turnovers, and forcing mistakes. And it is a simple game plan, but it's hard to execute. And we're consistently executing, or have been over the last 3 weeks. So yeah, fingers crossed we can keep going. But here's a difficult question: Swans, Dogs, or Demons? Who goes further?
I'm going to give you a one-word answer from my gut: is Dogs.
Yeah, they're looking pretty good. I think if I didn't go Swans in this, I'd go Dogs. Demons obviously have got Ben Brown and Wiedemann to come back, so they're sitting pretty as well. But yeah, the Dogs midfield is just a thing of beauty, isn't it? So at this stage, the Dogs, but I'm hoping that the Swans. But yeah, I think Dogs, Swans, Demons in that order. Out of that, just looking at those three teams. Okay, have you got anything to add to that, mate? Or
yeah, I guess we were talking offline before we started recording as well about this and sort of what happens next for the Swans, because for the first 3 weeks they've been a team that no one's expected to get a result, especially the first and third games. No one expected the Swans to go to the Gabba and win. No one expected the Swans to beat Richmond at the MCG. people would have expected them to beat. You expected them to beat Richmond at the MCG. So as I said, credit where credit is due. But Adelaide, that was a game they were expected to win, and it was actually the most workmanlike of the three results, I think, in many ways. So what that's going to mean now is that you don't just go and beat the premiers and the previous year's prelim finalists on their home in their home stadiums and have no one pay attention. The entire football world is going nuts talking about the Swans right now. And that means that every single coach who hasn't played them yet is going to be going through their tapes and picking their game apart. So what happens when we become the hunted rather than the underdog, I think is going to tell a lot. I think to be considered, for me to get excited about us being a top 8 team, I think that the next 3 games, which is Essendon at home, Giants at home, Suns away, I think we get at least 2, preferably 3 wins out of those heading into Geelong in round 7, and then I'll start to get excited about us as a top 4 team. Or top 8 team, I should say. Top 8. Let's start.
Top 8.
Let's not get too carried away. Top 8. Top 8's where we'll go.
No, I mean, honestly, everyone expected us to be bottom 4 again this year. So I agree. Let's see how we go over the next 3 weeks. 2 home games, 1 away against some good teams, some bad teams, but that doesn't matter because teams can turn their form on any given what days of the week do we play now? We play almost every. It's not a coronavirus world, but it's certainly Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, much to your disappointment, because you're definitely in the Friday, Saturday, Sunday only. Thank you very much, Gil McLaughlin camp.
Yes, I just get confused when there's football on a Monday afternoon. I don't know what's going on.
It's a bit like this episode this week. We're sort of scrambling to get everything ready because we had a short week. So I guess now we know why they rested Buddy Franklin. But
yeah, exactly. If we can't get a podcast out in that time, surely Buddy can't get ready to play a game of football.
That's it. All right, mate. Well, I think we'll move on to the next part of the podcast, which is the last section. And in that, we're going to focus on 3 games in the upcoming round. Most importantly, of course, the Swans' next game. And then we're going to look at 2 other games of interest. So you're going to look at one, I'm going to look at one. Then we're going to finish off with our tips for the rest of the games of the round. And that's how this section will play out. So game 1 of round 4 is a home game for the second place Bloods, taking place this Thursday, the 8th of April at the SCG against another team coming off a big win, the 10th placed Essendon Bombers, with first bounce at 7:20 p.m. local time. So Stevo, kick us off. Where are we at with injuries? We've touched on it throughout. I think we finished the Tigers game with a clean bill of health.
There were none reported, at least. No reported injuries, and all the players seemed to run out the game okay. They didn't use the injury sub or anything. But it looks like we're maybe or more than likely going to have Rowbottom coming back from injury and also Franklin coming back.
Yeah, I think that's been announced in the media and on the Swans app. And so obviously, as we've said, Franklin comes in and McLean most likely drops out. But Rowbottom coming in is a much more difficult question, I think. So if Rowie is fit and he's ready to go, then you think he comes in?
I think so. Yeah, I think he's a best 22 player. If he's fit, yeah, I reckon he plays, and probably McInerney is the unlucky one.
Yeah, I think McInerney had a good game. I think the one thing that he probably missed from the game against the Tigers was a goal or a couple of goals. But he performed consistently well throughout that game on the wing there. And so I think he would be quite stiff, but I think it just goes to show that there's that level of internal competition. And if it's not McInerney, I think last week we were talking about Lizard Nick Blakey, but I think he must have, maybe he listened to the podcast and we gave him a bit of a rocket because I think he had quite a good game, and he seemed much cleaner and much more relaxed around the ball. But do you think the same about Blakey there?
I think Blakey played well, yeah. I couldn't see him getting left out unless there was some sort of injury or something. The advantage, I think, with someone like McInerney, he's very, very good, but he's an outside player. So bringing a Rowbottom type back in, and also because right now what's happened with Rowbottom out is that Warner has gone in to an extent and taken over what Rowbottom had been doing. Especially around the centre bounces and stuff. But what both Warner and Rowbottom are guys who can play both inside and outside, whereas McInerney is maybe more of an outside player. So perhaps you want to bring in bring out the one guy who's maybe a little bit less versatile. I mean, you couldn't throw McInerney into the centre square, for example.
Yeah, and I think that's probably what it's going to come down to, unless, of course, there's a couple of the young players pull up sore. But as we've said, I think that everyone's pulled up fine. I think there was a little bit of cramping. I think Rampy and McCartan looked like they had a few cramps at later stages. But I think Logan and Errol and Braden all looked fine. It's just whether or not their bodies are holding up after a big start to the season, and hopefully they do, because that's the next question there. Which Swan flies high this week, Steve?
I think, and this is assuming he plays, because I feel that if Franklin comes back in, the obvious one is that McLean goes out. But maybe they do keep McLean in. Who knows? If they don't, then I guess McDonald is the one who would go out if they feel like he needs a rest. Because he's played 3 solid games of AFL footy now. It's a 5-day break, so maybe he's one that they would consider rotating for the week. But assuming that Logan does play, I reckon he's going to make the Rising Star Committee give us a 4th one. He's going to kick 4, 1 a quarter.
Steve-O, I agree with you. But 4 goals is not enough for me. I think he's going to come out and kick a bag. I think he's going to kick 6, and Buddy's just going to be the distracting target all game. And Logan McDonald's just going to nab him, grab him, snap him, and just take home the chocolates. So, no pressure to Logan there. But, I think that's my Swan, or our Swan, who is probably going to fly high this weekend.
So Buddy Franklin's going to play foil to Logan McDonald. That's awesome.
Wow. It's got to happen at some point. Okay, in terms of opposition players we need to look out for, who do you think are their danger players?
For me, I mean, they've got some really good midfielders, some really zippy midfielders who use the ball really well. The 2 that I think stand out for me is Parrish and Merritt. They're good players. They're going to win their fair share of the ball no matter what we do to them. So I think we need to make sure that footy that they get isn't clean. And if we can just marginalize their effect a bit, it'll go a long way to stopping them getting that good ball out of the middle into their forwards, who also like to operate in space.
Yeah, absolutely. And so obviously the Bombers have had a couple of big injuries in the last week, with Sam Draper, their up and coming ruckman, out with an ankle. Dylan Shield, I think, is a knee, and that sounds like a long one, maybe 10 plus weeks. And obviously Jai Caldwell with a serious hammy, I think 6 weeks. So they're 3 pretty significant injuries, but obviously the Bombers absolutely smacked the Saints last week. So the players that came in did the job and did it very well. Stringer came back in, obviously, and he's looking lighter and meaner. The package, as he, I think, or the media likes to refer to him as, looks very good. And what's your position on Stringer?
I think he's a good player, but I also think that he's a sort of player that, I mean, and this is true for all forwards to an extent, that he needs good delivery coming into him. He likes to, he's very smart. He positions himself well. He is very good at making sure that if he can get in a situation where the ball is his advantage side, he's going to win that contest. And so I think we just need to stop their midfielders giving him that sort of service to negate him, because we have 2 very, very good key defensive backs to put on him. Who will win their share of 50-50s, but it's very hard as a defender to win a ball when it's getting put exactly where the forward wants it.
Yeah, look, I think the other player who's actually a favourite player of mine, and he's always very dangerous and lively, is McDonald Tippenwoody. And I guess you put a small on him, and that might be Cunningham, I'm guessing. Otherwise, they may put Hewitt down back, who's obviously been playing down back for the first 3 games of the season and looks fantastic. So I think if you can stop, as you were saying, if our talls can hold Stringer, and I think they've got Harry Jones, the young key forward there, if we can stifle those guys, but then also back up our support on their smalls, Snelling, and I think Alec Waterman has come in. But I think hopefully we can do what we need to do to get the win. And that, I mean, in terms of game style, surely we just say, keep doing what we've been doing over the past 3 weeks. Would you agree?
Yep, definitely. I mean, it's worked 3 weeks in a row, and until other sides start to figure out what to do to counter it, then I think they're doing really well.
Yeah, the Bombers for me, they're always a little bit of a bogey team. It's usually a close game, and I think we've lost the most recent ones, usually close. So, do we win?
I'm tipping the Swans. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if I tip the Swans against the Tigers at the MCG, I'd be pretty rude to not back us in against the Bombers at home. So yeah, I'm going to go the Swans as well. But I think it's going to be a tougher game than we think, or than maybe people are thinking. Just because we beat the Tigers doesn't mean the Bombers are going to be easy. So yeah, I think we're putting us on warning. But yeah, I'll pick the Swans. All right. So I think the other two games of the round we're going to focus on is Port versus Tigers, which you're going to do, and then I'm going to look at Dogs versus Lions. So why don't you give us a quick summary of your view of game 2 of the round?
Okay. So yeah, Friday night, Port Adelaide versus Richmond at the Adelaide Oval, 7:50 local time, I guess. Look, we've got two teams that are both highly rated, both predicted to be top 4 flag contenders that have come off pretty disappointing results. I mean, we've talked a lot already about Richmond and what happened against Sydney, but then Port were humbled pretty badly in the West against West Coast Eagles over the weekend as well. That one kind of slid under the radar with the whole Richmond-Sydney thing. I think they didn't get enough scrutiny maybe on Port as to what went wrong there because there was other things going on. I don't think that Richmond were so much bad as they were just soundly beaten. And I don't think that that group of players is going to let itself get soundly beaten 2 weeks in a row. Richmond's loss wasn't without precedent. In 2020, last year, in their premiership year, they lost to non-final teams. They had a bad loss against the Hawks. They had a loss against the Giants. You can't be up all the time. So I don't see this as the end of Richmond, which some people seem to be talking about. I think that, every good team has a bad day, and they had their bad day against a good team who had a good day. So that's what happened to get belted. I guess both teams, or especially Richmond, would be expected to be 3-1 or 3-0 right now. Port's loss maybe is a bit more forgivable. So 2-1 would have been about right for them, given they had that game in Perth, but they didn't play well. They really got outdone by West Coast for most of the game. So I guess a lot of it's going to be which team rises up and fixes the problems from last week. If we look first at Richmond, we talk of the Richmond system all the time. Everyone talks about the Richmond system, but they do have a lot of role players. The media is always talking about this Richmond system. You can sub one in and sub one out, but I tend to think it's a bit more deep than that. They do have a lot of these role players, like they're sort of 12th to 22nd best that they could easily bring in out, but they really do rely on a group of, a dozen or so players. And if we look at what happened in the Swans game, we look at the group of players that Richmond have since 2017 that have either been All-Australian squad members in that 40-player squad, or they've come top 3 in a Tigers best and fairest. There are 13 players there, if we include Lynch, who also made All-Australian in 2016 when he was at the Suns. There are 13 players there. What's his name? Rance is gone. So there's 12. 9 of those played against the Swans. 10 were named, but then I'm not going to count Presty because he got injured so early. So 9 of them still played against the Swans, but they didn't have an impact, especially in the first half. So I think what Port Adelaide can do is look at what Sydney did. They didn't let those key players have an impact. Their key forwards, especially in the first half of the game, were invisible. If you combine Revolt and Lynch, their stats in the first half against Sydney, between the two of them, they got 8 disposals, 4 marks, 0 tackles, and a goal. That's not even a great half of football for one big forward, really. And then Martin and Cochin combined in that first half had 18 touches, a mark, no goals, and 3 tackles. So they really didn't let these guns do anything. So can Port Adelaide get their run up and really, really do what Sydney did to Richmond? I think that will decide it. Richmond, if they just do their regular thing, will be fine. If Port can reset, then they can maybe cause an upset. Even though it's in Adelaide, I'm still calling Richmond the favourite for this one.
I am also going to pick the Tigers here, just because I think, they're going to come out breathing fire. And although Adelaide's tough to play in, I think they're going to get it done. All right. Well, that was a fantastic summary, mate. I was intently listening. I almost forgot what we were doing there. Okay, so it's my turn.
I did my homework
announce.
this week after my Fremantle disaster last week, where I didn't know that they had no players playing. I thought I'd better do some research.
You really did. And I got lost in your analysis there, and I forgot, what time it was. So,
Yeah.
I'm going to look at the third game of the round. So it's a nice, neat 1, 2, 3 in chronological order this week. It's the Western Bulldogs, the first place Western Bulldogs versus the 13th place Brisbane Lions at Mars. So that's at Ballarat. So that's Western Bulldogs regional or regional town. Where they play when they go out to the country, and that is at 1:35 local time in the afternoon, 1:35 p.m. this Saturday. So as we've touched on, the Dogs are flying pretty high at the moment themselves. They're coming first. They've got a wonderful midfield unit, which is just they're just it's overrun with talent. I think Treloar came into the midfield last week. And was just lacing kicks to Bruce, who kicked a bag. I think it was I have to remember, it was like a first time in 20 or 30 years or something that a Western Bulldogs player has kicked 10 goals. So huge achievement there for Josh Bruce, who's looking fantastic. And I was thinking about this. I heard that he's gone off. He's on a bit of a detox, so I don't know what that includes, but I think they said alcohol and maybe certain types of food. But I'd wondered what had promoted him to do that. And obviously the Dogs had pick one last year with Jamari Ugle-Hagan. So you've got the next Buddy Franklin waiting to steal your spot. So that would probably get you to work on your game. But it's obviously looking very nice. And granted, they played the Roos, who we texted each other during that game, and you said it was embarrassing, like it was terrible, that it was as bad as the early days of the Giants and the Suns. So that was enough for me to not bother getting back into it. But in terms of the game, okay, so we've got the Dogs versus the Lions in Ballarat. So it's a home ground advantage, of sorts, to the Dogs. The Lions obviously lost to us in round one, had that awful way of finishing the Cats game in Geelong. But then last week against the Pies, the fortunes turned, and Zach Bailey, who was denied that opportunity in Cardinia Park to kick the winning goal on the bell with that clear holding the ball by Blitzavs, he was able to have that opportunity to kick the goal after the siren for the Lions to get the win. And that classic view of Buckley after they had won was just sitting there, just looking very grumpy. But Zach Bailey, Iceman, he is just a fantastic player and continues to get better and better. And I believe, even though Oscar McInerney continues to be a big out, I think he's 50-50, because it was a pretty awful roll of the ankle, even though he battled on in that Cats game. I think he'll still probably be out. Last week I think they split the ruck duties between Fullerton and Danaher, but obviously Brodie Grundy just had a field day and a fantastic fantasy score. And I captained him and got 300 points. It was fantastic. But Gardner and Berry are likely ins, and they are two very big ins for Brisbane. I think what Gardner brings to Brisbane's backline, I don't want to say they've specifically been missing that, but he is one of their key pillars back there. And I think he has been missed for these first three rounds. Obviously, Berry is that inside bull type to come in and relieve the pressure off Lachie Neale, who was clearly targeted in the Cats game. I think people are starting to see you can put a hard tag on Lachie and really limit his abilities. But with those two players in, depending on Oscar McInerney, I also think Devon Robertson, who actually played WA under 18s with Chad Warner in the midfield group there. Dev Robinson was the captain of the WA team. He had his first game of this year. I think he played one or two games last year, not to great effect, but he had a very good game and was clearly ready to stay in at this level. So I think it just depends on Oscar McInerney's fitness. and then whether or not Gardner and Berry do come in. But with all those, I think the Dogs have got a key out in Ryan Gardner. So you'll bring in likely either Young or Cordy, and I think that's pretty much a like for like. So just based on form alone, you would say the Dogs should win this. But I think the Lions, now that they had that win against the Pies and they're building momentum, I think that this is going to be a much harder game than probably the odds would let on. So first versus 13th, obviously we're still early in the season, but I think this is going to be a very close game, and it should be an exciting game if both teams continue to play how they've been playing. Obviously, the Dogs with flair and scoring ability, and the Lions just a very mature ability to stay in games. So, yeah, I'm going to pick the Dogs because they're at home, but it's going to be tough. How about you, mate?
I'll pick the Dogs too. I want to pick the Lions, especially because I've got a big soft spot. I'm a big fan of Fagan, their coach. And I think he's a sort of bloke that can probably motivate them on the road because they've been away from home for a couple of weeks now. But I have to, Dogs. I'm picking Bulldogs.
Yeah. All right, mate. So I'm just going to read through the remaining games of the round, and you just shout out your tip, and I'll do the same as we go. So game 4 is 16th place Saints versus 5th place Eagles at Marvel on Saturday afternoon.
Eagles.
Yeah, me too. They absolutely smashed, who was it? Port Adelaide last week. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
All right. Game 5, 9th placed Suns versus 12th placed Blues at Metricon, so Gold Coast on Saturday night.
I'll take Gold Coast.
Yeah, I'm gonna go the Blues here, mate, for the upset.
Okay. It'll be an interesting game.
Yeah, the Blues surprised me with their win against the Dockers, so perhaps they're starting to get it together. But the Suns are looking good as well, so I think it will be a close game. But yeah, keep it interesting and go the Blues, mate. Game 6, we've got 11th placed Magpies versus 17th placed Giants at MCG on Saturday night. Magpies.
Yeah, Collingwood.
Yeah, I couldn't even wait for you to give me your tip then. Sorry, mate. It's just I'd be really worried if I was a Giants supporter.
That's a good thing because there's not many of them around, so there's not many worried people in Sydney.
All right, game 7, we've got 18th placed Kangaroos versus 8th placed Crows at Marvel on Sunday afternoon.
Adelaide. North Melbourne didn't look like a football team when I watched them play on the weekend. Crows by a lot.
Yeah, the Roos are in a world of hurt, and I don't mind that because I still remember losing to them in the 96 grand final. So I do love it when North are in a world of pain. So game 8, we've got the 3rd place Demons versus 7th placed Cats at MCG on Sunday afternoon.
This is a big one. I'm tipping Melbourne. I think this is probably the other game of the round that we could have chosen to preview in more depth would have been this one. Melbourne for me.
Yeah, I'm also going to go the D's because I just think they look good, and I love Cozzy Pickett. And also the Cats weren't convincing against the Hawks on Easter Monday. So, yeah, I think the D's, who are 3-0, we've spoken about. Maxi Gawn just keeps getting it done, doesn't he?
Yeah, he played well.
Yeah, okay, so last game of the round, game 9, we've got 15th placed Dockers versus 14th placed Hawks at Optus in Perth on Sunday afternoon. What do you think, mate?
I'm going to tip Hawthorn to go over and get a win in Perth. I watched them against Geelong, and I thought they looked all right. So Hawthorn and Fremantle, it's like a yo-yo. You don't know what you're going to get every week. So I'm going Hawks.
Yeah, I was going to say Elliot Yeo plays for the Eagles and he's out at the moment, but I see what you did there.
Yeah, I didn't even do it on purpose. Imagine if I scripted this.
Look at that. Yeah, wow, we're just off the dome, mate. Look, I was expecting the Dockers to beat the Blues and was quite shocked. But again, I guess that bit strong win at home was against the Giants, and they are complete rabble. So this is a hard game for me to call. I think the Dockers need to bounce back. It's at home. The Hawks are better placed than I think people would agree. So I'm gonna go with the Dockers to keep it interesting.
Okay, very good.
Dockers Hawks. Okay, and we'll let a couple more rounds go before we give you an update. I think me picking the Swans clawed a few back, so we'll give a proper update in the coming rounds. But yeah, I think Stevo, you went into round 3 all confident, and I picked a couple back, and
I think I was after last week, after 2 rounds, I was up by 2, and I'm thinking, right, I'm going to win this by 20 at this rate. And then, you clawed back. I think we're back even now. So I should have done what I said. I should have cheated and just copied all your tips for the rest of the year and won by 2.
Yes, and that wouldn't have been fun. So thank you for not. But also, just like the young Swans, it's a week by week proposition, mate. So just stay on your toes.
And integrity of the competition is important to us here at Bevy.
That's right. That's right. It's all about the integrity and the equity and being swift and nimble and flexible.
That's right. It's not like, because if I compare like me doing that, me cheating on my tips would have been like Dangerfield playing VFL when he was on an AFL suspension, and you wouldn't hear that happening. So why would I do it?
Stevo, did that actually happen?
Yes, it totally happened. Yeah, he played in a VFL practice match when he was on his suspension 2 weeks ago. Yeah.
Wow, I did not know that.
No,
there you go. There's one set of rules for Patrick Dangerfield, and then there's another set of rules for everyone else.
There is.
And that is the Danger Show. Welcome to the Danger Show. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode. On behalf of the Bevy, I'd like to thank you all for listening. We look forward to joining us next time. Make sure to follow us on Instagram, on our Insta page and Facebook pages at A Bevy of Bloods for other updates and tidbits. Until then, up the Bloods and calm the Swannies.